When I was a kid and I started to get into video games, I always had one fascination. Maybe it came from reading books like Harry Potter or Percy Jackson, where there is a hidden world of magic just out of sight. Or maybe it was simply childhood naivety. But video games always seemed like the closest thing to real magic. They felt limitless, exciting, and endlessly mysterious. I was particularly fascinated by the out-of-bounds areas beyond the playable space. I would always try to find ways to jump myself out of a level or crawl through some tiny gap, just to see if I could explore the world that I imagined must be just on the other side. It was this sense of a larger world that was always just out of view that drew me into these games, and gave me a feeling of excitement and mystery every time I played them. I could see stuff out there, damn it, and I wanted to explore it. I wanted to know where that door leads, or where I would end up if I got onto that catwalk. I was sure there were secrets I could learn if only I could break through the confines of the level and explore that secret world I felt so sure was out there. As I got older, and my knowledge of how the world worked and how video games worked grew, I began to easily recognize the artifice of game worlds, and slowly abandoned that fantasy of some hidden world of NPCs and secrets that was just out of reach beyond the levels. And while I missed that sense of wonder and mystery that games used to hold, I also knew that it was just part of growing up, like realizing Santa isn't real, or that wearing a sleeveless hoodie and arm warmers to school doesn't actually make you look cool. Well, despite that, I haven't been able to stop myself from chasing that feeling of mystery and wonder ever since. And so far, I've only found one game that's brought it back, making my imagination run wild with what might be hiding just beyond the bounds of the play area. And that game is Naissance. I'm gonna pause here quickly, because if you can relate to any of what I just said, or if you think any of that sounds interesting, then please, I beg you to stop watching this video right now and go play Naissance for yourself. It's only about 4 hours long and it's completely free on Steam. The whole appeal of the game is the mystery and the sense of discovery that you experience playing it and exploring its world. And as I want to discuss this game in more detail going forward, I'll have to spoil some of those amazing moments of wonder and awe that you can find at some of the amazing discoveries in this game. So, don't worry, I'll still be here, waiting when you come back, so please, take a break, finish the video once you're done. And if you're still not sold on it, don't worry, there'll be one more warning later on before I get into the real spoilers. When you first start up Naissance, you're greeted with the only cutscene in the game. You are running from some unknown entity in some unknown space. The only sounds are your footfalls as you run and your panicked breathing. You're then greeted with the simple but ominous text: Lucy is lost. This is the only framing you ever get in this game. The rest is left entirely up to your interpretation and imagination. I like to think that this intro implies you're a human, as the breathing sure sounds human, and Lucy is certainly more commonly used as a name for humans than anything else. This makes you a perfect contrast to the second thing introduced in this opening: the setting. The cold, empty corridors set the tone for the game. It's ambiguous, mysterious, and more than a little creepy. Finally, it also introduces you to the art style, which is something I haven't really seen before or since. It immerses you in incredibly stark, brutalist spaces, completely devoid of texture or color, but with dramatic lighting that is often used to highlight the complex architecture and the alien shapes of these levels. All these spaces are completely devoid of color, with the only color you see coming from the lighting itself, giving it all a very alien atmosphere. You see things that are recognizable as architecture used in our world, but the presentation of it feels so inhuman. It's almost like an architectural uncanny valley. And as we'll see, this simple art style is used to masterful effect. So overall, I think this is the perfect introduction to the game. You wake up in this strange room, completely empty except for a single door leading into ominous blackness. And again, this sets the tone for the game, as the first thing you must do is walk into complete darkness, only to then have to crawl into a tiny hole in the wall. You traverse some more simple platforming until you get your first taste of why this game sparks that sense of childlike wonder and mystery. So far, this has been pretty standard 3D platformer stuff. You've been guided by a floating light showing you a very linear path with a set of challenges that function just like a standard linear adventure game. It lulls you into a sense of familiarity and almost mundanity after that opening. That is, until you get to the next room. After going through these dark or dimly lit rooms and crawl spaces, you see a gap in the wall, and through it is an impossibly bright light. So bright, you can't see anything of the room it's coming from. You keep going, and then you turn the corner, and you see a gap just big enough that you can crawl right into that impossibly bright room. Once you do, you will see that the light is actually fluctuating on and off, seemingly coming from the walls themselves, at odds with everything you've seen up until now, and it's about to turn on again with you inside. For a second, I wondered if I'd gone the wrong way, if this was going to be a fail state, as there's no way back out, and maybe I'll just get burned up when that light turns on again and have to find some other route that I must have missed in the darkness. But just when the light becomes unbearable, the wall opens up behind you and you can escape. But the moment you escape, it just raises more questions, as you're now in a massive hallway, bigger than any space you've previously seen. Looking up and down this new hall, you can see that there are many doors just like the one you came through, also opening and closing in time with their own lights. And this starts the incredible world design of Naissance. With a single step, your whole impression of the world and how it works has changed. That sense of mystery from the intro starts to creep back in. What was the point of that room? Why are there so many like that? If the path from the intro led me into that room, are there paths that lead into the rest of those bright rooms? If so, where did they come from? The path seemed to lead directly here, but why? If someone made a path like that, what was the reason anyone used that path? These lights and doors seem to be part of some process, but what is it? What is the purpose of it? There has to be some reason for them to exist, right? The stark industrial feeling of the hallway you've now moved into just fuels these questions, in contrast to the almost random feeling of the architecture before. And because you feel like now you might be outside of the area you're meant to be in, that hallway seems like it was designed to be walked in. But now, it's like you've gone backstage, seeing the engine room, or getting lost in the hallways of an empty office building. It now feels like you shouldn't be here, like the path that led you here might have been a flaw in the structure. You feel like an ant that's found its way into some massive machine through a crack in the casing. I love this. The way it breaks convention and throws you off right when you thought you were starting to understand it is something you just don't get often in games. You're supposed to be the chosen one, the hero, not some unfortunate individual who accidentally stumbled into somewhere they don't belong. As you press on, things once again start to seem more normal. The architecture keeps up with the brutalist, industrial feel, and it starts to lull you back into a false sense of security. There's some obvious platforming sections, sometimes you have those light orbs to guide you again, and it all starts to feel like a regular video game again. That is, until you hit the first one of this game's moments. These moments are the exact reason why I'm preaching to play this game before watching the video, because this game has a lot of these moments where something happens that you could never predict and you're confronted with something that is so truly awe-inspiring and also somewhat terrifying, that for me at least, it brought me right back to those childhood memories where video games were magical places full of wonder and mystery. I'll spoil the first one here, then advise you once again to go play the game before I explore it any further. After a lot of platforming and exploration, you reach a large empty room, and some kind of massive doorway opens, and you're sucked into a blinding white light. You're then deposited in a pristine white hallway, and unable to return, you have to push onwards. You keep going, you round a corner, see what seems to be a regular doorway, and then... This is the true magic of the game, utilizing incredible visuals with immense scale to create a truly overwhelming feeling for the player. The sheer size of the space is something I've never seen in a game before. Now sure, I've seen some games with massive scale, but none of them actually feel this big. I think it's the verticality of the game's environments that really does it. A lot of games show you a space that seems to stretch out infinitely, and we're used to that. However, the sense of an infinitely expanding vertical space is what really makes you feel small. This is partly also the result of the artificial nature of the space. While a naturally formed mountain or lake in another game might be unbelievably immense if actually measured, they don't tend to inspire the same sense of awe. When something is man-made, or seemingly man-made, there's an extra level of wonder that gets added to it. If someone made it, then why? What could its purpose possibly be? Why would anyone create a structure so unfathomably large? And how? You can see a few lights on in what seems to be windows on the opposite side. You can see steam rising from the vents in the walls and the rooftops, but you can't quite seem to see anything that explains all this. You can see elements that seem familiar, but when put together this way, they create a whole that just doesn't feel right. That brings me on to the second element that brings back that sense of mystery. This game is kind of creepy. Not in the, ooh, something's gonna jump out around the corner kind of way, but more in the, I'm alone in a space that should be crowded with people, but is completely empty kind of way. It taps into some of the uneasiness of liminal spaces. You spend a lot of your time traversing what seems to be access passages, catwalks, and crawl spaces. They are the areas that you see from a distance in real life, but rarely, if ever, get to actually enter. It's like the storage rooms behind the shops in a mall, or the basement of your old high school. There's an ever-present, unsettled feeling of, should I be here? The spaces don't feel designed for human traversal, and you feel like you've gotten lost in the endless back hallways of some nightmarish factory. You feel forever stuck behind the scenes of some great play, stumbling in the dark over props and costumes for some production you could never even understand. Furthering the sense of being backstage, or being behind the scenes, or just somewhere you shouldn't be, is the level design. This game reminds me of exploring a cave. You know the path you're on isn't really a path, and probably doesn't lead somewhere, but as long as there is a path, you can't help but get sucked deeper and deeper in by the promise that answers might be found just around the next corner. From the very start, you've only had one line of context. Lucy is lost, and it takes on a much more sinister feeling as you explore this space. It was one thing when you thought you were lost in some factory or space station, but now, faced with how utterly insignificant you are in the face of this cold and inhuman landscape, you realize just how lost you must be. In a structure this immense, you could easily be swallowed whole, and no one would ever come close to finding you. A speck of dust, fallen lightly onto the spine of a single book in a library of 1,000 shelves. This is it. This is your final warning. You should totally go play this game before I spoil the rest of it. Trust me, if you've liked anything you've seen so far, then this game is very worth your time, and please, don't let me ruin your fun by spoiling some of the better reveals that happen later on, and trust me, they do get even better than that one. However, despite this enormity and sense of sheer insignificance, you also get the very unnerving sense that somehow you're not alone. Those small hints of life, the lit windows, the machinery still running, clearly this place is not fully abandoned, but if it isn't, then where is everyone? There's a constant creeping sense of dread as you feel like there are eyes watching you from the dark corners of these immense spaces, like something is following you, but staying just far enough behind that you can't see it. I mean, something chased you down here to begin with, right? A vague sense of dread and unease is a big part of that feeling of mystery I was describing earlier. As most fear comes from the unknown, it follows then that when something is creepy, it often also feels mysterious. This sense of unease is another element that brings me back to my early days of playing video games, when I didn't fully understand the general language of game design or storytelling, and it felt like literally anything could be around that next corner. This game breaks so many of the conventional ideas of level design and world building that it hits that same sense of unpredictability. In a normal game, even when you're supposed to be in an open area, you can usually always tell where you're supposed to go, and can usually even see the path to get there. Take this example from the first Uncharted. You're supposed to be exploring a lush jungle filled with unexplored ruins. And sure, there are trees and bits of fallen stonework, but it's completely obvious where you're supposed to go, and you know exactly how you're supposed to get there. But if I show you a large area from Naissance, where do you think you're supposed to go? In this example, the actual path has you walking down a thin decorative edge, then using broken cables as steps to find your way to the lower level, before jumping a gap to land on the midpoint of a staircase, which then finally takes you to the next area of the level. As a kid, in so many games, I would look at something and think, I could probably make that jump, or I could probably walk over there. But in reality, when I tried to jump there, I would find that the developers have put an invisible wall, or don't actually have collision on the ledge at all, so you just end up falling through. But in Naissance, even if a path leads nowhere, you can always still jump to that ledge or walk along that thin piece of geometry. I mean, the designer himself said that he didn't use a single invisible wall in the game, and you can tell. The game fuels the explorer in me that longs to push every boundary, to look behind every door and follow every catwalk and jump to every ledge, hoping that I might find that world that I always dreamed of as a kid. Furthermore, you're often rewarded for exploring off the obvious path because the game is full of secrets, from a serene room full of beautiful architecture and soft orange lighting to a terrifying void that breaks reality and makes you once again rethink your understanding of the true scale of the structure. Even in those secret areas, the game is still hinting at more. In that decorative room, there's a big gap, and across that gap, you can see a mirrored version of the room you're in, with its own door leading into its own darkness. Or that void room has a wall infinitely tall and infinitely wide behind you as you run as far into the darkness as you dare. The world is always bigger than what you can see, and it's always suggesting that there is so much more just beyond the next corner, making it both tantalizing and terrifying. A perfect example of this is deep in the game when you go through a beautifully lit and arch-filled hallway, only to have it end abruptly with the stunning vista of a massive technological canyon with lightning crackling along the walls. And you see that your bridge across this canyon is just one of hundreds of other bridges, each one leading to its own mysteries. Your path is just one, but who knows how many other possibilities. You think of the whole journey you've had just to get you here, all the different sights and paths you passed, and then you think about how each one of those bridges must lead to just as many mysteries. The world just feels so vast, and you feel so small in comparison to its majesty. All this brings me to what I believe to be inarguably the best moment of the whole game. And once again, if you haven't played it, please go play it. Throughout your whole journey, there's always been a subtle but steady downwards trajectory to your journey. You're always going deeper, making drops you can't climb back up from, sinking inexorably into the depths of this inhuman world. And finally, after you've made it through the most surreal and alien areas of the game, you're finally dropped off at the foot of an impossible staircase. Gone is the brutalist grandeur of the rest of the game. There are no imposing structures or mysterious sculptures. It's just a staircase, completely unadorned and unsupported, disappearing into the blackness. You begin to climb, and you keep climbing. For 2 full minutes you climb. Before finally, shapes begin to emerge from the darkness. And you find yourself back in the familiar stark white lighting and brutal shapes of the rest of this world. You go around a few more corners, pass through a doorway onto a rooftop, and you are confronted with this. This is the closest thing to nature you've ever seen in the game. Somehow, after all that, seeing something organic and natural is more jarring than anything else that could have been here. You've traveled so far and gone down so deep, there's no way that there could be nature here. But you look up in the sky and realize you still haven't truly escaped the never-ending labyrinth of concrete insanity. You see that you have only stepped out of one building into an infinite sea of structures. Despite all you've seen and all the distance you've covered, in the end you're nothing but one grain of sand in a boundless desert. This seemingly incredible journey, just one of a never-ending march of identical buildings. The wind softly whistles as you stare out into the infinite void. But this piece, it has to end at some point, so you take the only option available. You jump. Falling past an infinite sea of structures and machinery, you finally understand that there is no way to ever truly know this world. It existed long before you came, and it will exist for long after you've left. And it is so much larger than you could have ever imagined. Even with all your exploration, whatever this is, wherever this is, it has spread past the bounds of what one human could ever understand, and is bigger than what any one person could ever explore. So finally, you leave this world the same way you entered it, without feeling as though you understand it any more than you did at first. Every mystery only led to more mystery, and at the end of it all, you simply find a small plain door frame full of blinding white light, and you step inside. And you're greeted with the simple text, "The beginning." Hey, just want to pop back in here as the credits roll for the game, and thank you for making it through my whole first video. I've never done this before, so, hope you enjoyed, And if you didn't, feel free to let me know in the comments what I could do better next time. And if you did like it, I'd really appreciate if you decided to stick around. On this channel, I'll be talking about movies, music, video games, just art in general, either that inspires me or that I find to be particularly of note. But hey, you made it through one video? Be great if you decided to, maybe give it a like or give me a subscribe, and I'll see you again next time. This is Dan, signing off.